worst case of lockdown here. So I'm actually saving you guys from a few things. So just a quick one about me. I work within Shell's digital department. So it's a horizontal where we build products. We effectively opt to go ahead and implement some of the best practices on the market, hopefully, in order to deliver transformational projects across our retail businesses, our upstream businesses, and other areas. My specific role is I usually am giving a brief, a opportunity where then I have to shape the product with the team, working with traditional product owners and different parts of the business to bring them on this journey where we go from an idea to verifying the idea using lean startup principles, and then actually delivering the idea, whether it's an MVP or more. Most of the time it's a minimum viable product because we want to ascertain whether it's worth investing or not investing in this product. Been with Shell for a little while, but prior to this had a few startups too. And I'm glad to have you on this call today. So I think we have about 44 participants, which is exciting. I wanted to change this a second. So I want to hear a little bit from you. And for the first 5 to 10 minutes of this, we're going to do a practical exercise. It's not just going to be you sit back and watch and relax. Sorry, it's going to be a slightly different session. In the window right now, I was wondering if I just post the link, could I, if I just get rid of that. Actually, John, are you on the line as well? You know, the link that I used earlier. Is there any chance that you could share it in the window right now?
Yes, let me post it up for everybody.
Fantastic. I think I've got it as well, actually. Excellent. From Jonathan. Excellent. So can you take that link for the first 5 minutes, copy it into Google Chrome, any other browser it seems to have issues with, and once you're in there, can you come off mic? This is going to be quite hysterical, 44 people, but just give a quick check-in of what character you're given. So I see rhinos, I see elephants, just want to hear your voice for 30 seconds. I'm going to curate that for 2 minutes. So once you're in the room, let me know. And I'm also sharing my screen so everyone can see what we're up to. Cool. Please feel free to come off and just name what animal you are and also say a quick hello.
I don't know what kind of animal I am.
It's in the bottom left of your window.
I'm a snail. I'm a snail.
Fantastic. And who's that?
This is Jason, sorry.
Nice to meet you, Jason. And thank you very much.
We met already, but it's...
it's just thanks for coming off mute. Anyone else want to just pluck up the courage really quickly to just come off mute and say who you've entered as? Go
on. I think there may be a slight problem in terms of people who are actually participating.
Right. Okay. Okay, sorry. So I'm sorry that we can't speak to each other today, but it looks like we've gotten quite a few people in the session. So on screen, I'm going to ask for a quick ask to be followed. Could you just do that really quickly? And then I've summoned everyone. I've got 23 people following me. Awesome. So here's your first challenge. It's a really simple challenge. You've got a question in front of you that says, how did your team getting through COVID, specifically in terms of ways of working, teamwork? It'd just be good to understand from your perspective. The way to work this, if I give you an example ticket, sticky note, is that if I go example here, you can see that I've just typed into one of the sticky notes. The other way you create a sticky note is you double click on screen. It creates one. You can change the color as well. But your challenge on this call is going to be, I'm going to set 2 minutes on the clock. Please add in what worked for you. I really want to hear from you for the first few 2 minutes, and I'll start speaking through them. Starting in 3, 2, 1, let's go. Okay, please get going. I like that one that just came through. I think the shark saying plenty social time, Zoom calls, drinks. That is important. Check-ins during retros. Checking moods, team happy. Yep, check-ins have always been important. But how did you get through it? I mean, we're not saying we're fully through this by any means, but maybe maybe through the harder period where we had more stringent lockdown, particularly in the UK. Check in during retros, H24 vocal chat open. If you could go into a little bit more on that one, I think it's the brown ladybug, that would be great. We started working asynchronously. Work from home, virtual check-ins. Taking each day as it comes, I can completely empathize because each day had so many challenges. We've got 60 seconds left. Keep them coming. If you can, drag them closer to the circle as well. So we're all there. Thank you to the visiting giraffe. You are definitely someone I like right now because you are doing that. And the visiting penguin. Morning walks, break from desk. Very important. Very important. Work from homes, visual check-in, virtual check-ins. This is lovely. 30 seconds to go. Please get your ideas on there. Good to see that we have a lot of participation in here. A quick active exercise to get the going. How did you and your team at work get through this? Could the visiting line share a bit more on that transparency ticket? I'm keen to see how did you create transparency, or whoever did transparency. That is great. Lots of fun, energize. Yes. Okay, so time is up. I would say pens down, post-it notes down, but let's just pause for a second. Let's do a quick recap for a minute. So phenomenal. We're seeing a lot of similar themes. So on the top left corner, we've got lots of energizers, small teams, check-ins with the team. I'm just working my way down anti-clockwise. So then we've got weekly check-ins, open daily hangouts, daily team stand-up, flexible working, morning walks from desk, very important for your mental state as well. Lots of fun energizers. Would be great to know what your ideas are. Please feel free to post them. Then we had things like plenty of things like socials. Socials have changed. It's a lot more virtual. So it's like, if anyone has any good ideas, I know quiz nights were popular. Then I had PlayStation nights. Then I had things like using tools like this in order to do it. Trying some of the replicate our behaviors online, understanding all the change rooms. This is phenomenal. Well, thank you for that. And we're going to stop there. And what I'd like you to do is close your browser, come back over to the Zoom window, where I'm going to just take you through a quick demo of a project that went live through COVID. And I want to just share our story. I'm not saying it's perfect, but hopefully you can get some key learnings from it, see a bit of our method, see a bit of some of the key tools and techniques. Okay. So on that note, I'm going to close the mural. And John, can I just do a quick check-in? Can you now see the support page or any of the presenters in front of you, the support page?
I can see the support page, yes.
Phenomenal. So why don't we start off with a story? The story here is the retail chatbot. So January early this year, where everything seemed to be economically fine, we went ahead and we were given the task of saying, right, can you create a chatbot which can help us optimize our conversations with our customers? So in particular, we had this Zendesk widget on most of our websites, but we wanted to automate some of the responses. The reason being is that to alleviate our customer operations specialist and automate those things that keep getting asked. But in addition to this, start to have more meaningful conversations with the customer. So let me talk you through what we actually built. Let's go through a demo in about 3-4 minutes. On the bottom right corner, when you get to the shell.support.com page, you can go to help, but most of the time customers go and click on chat. So in this instance, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in my name. I'm going to type in my email address for work. And I'm going to say I'm having login issues, which seems to be one of the key questions asked, particularly on our Shell Go Plus app. It's a phenomenal app. Please do download it if you get a chance as well. So let's talk you through what happens. The retail virtual assistant turns around and says, hello, I'm the Shell retail virtual assistant. I'm here to help you with any other questions that you may have regarding Shell UK products, services, and Go Plus program. Have you created an account? Yes, I've created an account. So let's see what happens next. One of the things you've noticed as well is that there's a slight delay in the response time to mimic a human being typing. So Retail Virtual Assistant says, thank you, this may be a password issue. To reset, simply forgot password. You'll receive an email with instructions on how to change. Does this help? Yes, actually it does help because it was a password issue. I've gone to reset button, I just forgot how to do that. So let's see what happens next. Great, can I help you with anything else? I'm going to say no, but I wanted to show you one of the most important features for us throughout the entire process, which should be happening in a second. Wait for it. This was it. How do you rate your experience with our virtual assistants? Because if you don't have a way and a mechanism to gauge the results of your particular product, then sometimes you're a bit lost in all the data. That's the end of that. Let's pivot over to effectively the retail chatbot. This is going to go through the story of how we started, who was involved on a high level project plan, something that's been fairly anonymized to be the big parts of if you're creating a chatbot project, what you're going to need. So as you can see, we started in January and then we went down to the bottom right in June. The team consisted of myself, an innovation lead, we had 2 product owners because we had a co-caps. One was more of actually a hands-on specialist, one had a broader view of what needed to happen. So that was a challenge, but definitely worked well. We decided to run simply a weekly sprint. So we wanted to keep the intensity up quite high. In terms of tooling, we just used a Jira. Big fan of Jira. In terms of cadence, we met every day for 15 to 30 minutes, strictly adhering to the stand-up, but also having a laugh and a joke. Through the journey, when we were doing this, we first of all, we needed to figure out what FAQs do we automate. So having been traditionally trained as a PM, but an absolute advocate of Agile, but at the same time, someone who loves lean startup, I like to blend tools and techniques. So what was scope? We understood what are the data points, what are the questions that we wanted to automate based on actual data that we pulled out from the system to say, it's these questions, this is the volume. We prioritized that way. Then we went ahead and we got on board a customer journey specialist who talked through how do you actually respond to someone, because linguistically it's quite a challenge. Then we effectively wrote these down. But then when we got to about February and March, this is where we started to see challenges, particularly in our project team. What I mean by that is when COVID hit, we had resources, and when I say resources is a bad word, we had people and friends and family go off sick, and myself included. I was off sick for 5 weeks. And what I saw was a tremendous effort from the team. What happened is that we've created a jovial environment where we spoke on at work, but we had our other social groups when we could talk purely about how we're doing, what's going on. And that helped because when someone went offline or needed support, it's almost as if the other team members, in fact, not almost as if the other team members went and filled that gap immediately. And I can't explain to you, that is one of the holy grails for anyone in a project team to be like, without friction, they step in with their skill sets. We talk about having a broad array of skill sets, but we did do that analysis on who's in the team, what they can do ahead of time. It's really helped us actually say, if we have a gap, someone else can come in quickly, which is something that we try to do project to project now. Then in addition to that, we spoke to the stakeholders and particularly the customers of this who are sponsoring this project, and they were very supportive too. They said, we understand your situation, but really it was the morale. The morale took a hit. And the morale was jovial at the beginning, but the morale was a bit more like, we're trying to get through effectively what sometimes people call the grind of a project to get this project out. And it was brilliant. People spoke to each other, supported, used positive language. And in addition to this, Shell has a very strong culture around honesty, integrity, and respect. And I'm happy to say that everyone exuberated this. It was fun as well. This was a new challenge for us and everyone was willing to chip in. How they specifically did that was that they made jokes sometimes. They made sure that if we were going through a stressful period that we didn't put too much pressure on anyone. We didn't manufacture deadlines, and we made sure that if we needed flexibility in cost, quality, or when it came to time, we could speak to our stakeholders and engage them. One thing that we did do, and a specific that I would definitely recommend, is we tried to communicate. So no one was left in the dark until the last moment. It was more like, this is our progress along the way, whether that's an email, a quick Yammer post, or any other of our internal social media platforms. So as you can see, those were the main challenges along January, February, March, April. Then we got to effectively the technical construction of this project, where we took it from an idea, its test environment, to really now refining it. I have to say chatbots are by far one of the most iterative products I've ever worked on. It went through about literally 6 iterations. So you create the language, you create what you think is the right response, and then you test and you test and you test. I'm very much an advocate of build, measure, learn, but at the same time, we needed to learn, measure, and then build and repeat this pattern 6 times. the team were energized, but in addition to this, story then prevails into we moved into getting effectively the wrapper around the technology ready for production towards April, May. We had less people because people were being impacted by COVID. And in addition to this, we had a globally dispersed team. We had people over in the Philippines, we had UK, we had quite a few different time zones as well. We had China as well, just trying to remind myself. But it was absolutely amazing to see people go through these particular challenges and get through to releasing the product that you see. Now, one thing I'd say is that the product's never finished. With this particular product, it is going to take numerous iterations now in production to get it better and better and better. But one thing that we did put in place was our key metrics. So during the project, it was weeks to launch. Then it was the deflection rate from the chatbot. And we have a few other key killer KPIs that we adhere to. And no joke, we actually measure on a daily basis. We have the analytics off the back of the chatbot that tell us what works and what doesn't. And I could only advocate this same approach, this analytical and lean analytics mindset to every single product we release. Getting feedback means we can improve, iterate, and move forward. So on a personal note, how did I feel through this as the Agile project manager or just a teammate? It was challenging because you think to yourself, what else could go wrong? But respectfully, that's when you have to mature and say, right, well, what are the risks that could occur and how do we mitigate them? I look to the design sprint from Jake Napsey, where he does this how might we moments. And that's how we curate a lot of our risk registers continuously. And that really helped. So it said, how might we? But there's some things that you just can't prepare for. So one thing I definitely say is create camaraderie. So camaraderie, don't force it either. It needs to be something that you can generally gel on, have sessions that you can sit back and relax and not speak about work about. Make sure in the diary and make them different. You have questionnaires. I saw some great ideas as well that I've got to participate and try as well. But also at the same time, make sure everyone's focused on that one goal, whether it's the launch of the product or whatever it may be. One of the key things as well, just to mention here is don't try and break individuals by putting too many deadlines on them. I've seen this happen multiple times. So one of my advices to that is do what's realistic and use that term. It's realistic to deliver this particular product in this time frame. And I'll probably just end on this, which I know this has been a crazy journey. You've seen the mural, you've seen the product, but what are my 3 takeaways for you? It's definitely going to be is morale. Make sure you keep that high in any way that you see is important. You're going to get energizers in the team. We had some absolutely amazing folk in the Philippines that came. They sent gifts, they spent emojis. It was great to have that environment. At the same time, don't lose focus of your main goal. And the third thing is make sure that if you have people that go off sick, empathize and respect at whatever tool you're using to deliver a project. Agile, lean, it doesn't matter about the process. It matters about the people and taking care of them. And with that, we got to the end, and it was one of the projects that went live through COVID, and I'm happy to say has been a fairly big success for us in this area. With that, I think I've spoken enough. John, are you still on the line? Am I good for time and good to open up? Yep.
Good.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we got a few questions. So the first one from Sarah. She asks, how did you manage the workload and stand-ups and communication with people from different regions?
So stand-ups, we worked to time zones. So we did a time zone calendar. We had people in the Philippines. So we tried to do it early UK time. We had someone in China. So we also married up the East to the West. So I had to do a bit of that analysis on paper quickly, just a quick Google, and get that sorted. Sorry, John, could you break me into the second and third parts of that question as well, please? Is that all right?
Yeah, so manage workload and stand-ups and communication.
Okay, stand-ups. So I love the trainer approach. We kept it 15 to, most of the time we're done in 15 minutes. In fact, I'd say 4 out of 5 days a week we are. Probably on a Friday, we have 15 minutes extra. Managing, I'd say before we started the project, we had a lot of people that were new to Agile. So we spent 2 or 3 hours just showing them what a stand-up looks like. and getting them trained. But one thing I found very useful, practical guide, is the rotation of facilitators. So empowering people to go ahead and ask those 3 questions and really let them feel like they're in the lead. It shouldn't always be one voice. I think that's, in terms of workload, we always made sure that we basically did midweek backlog checks. And with it being just a weekly sprint, it was quite easy to have transparency on that. Or I found sometimes when you break into 3 week sprints, it can be challenging. It is useful and it does work, but we were very specific. We made sure we use our user stories, but at the same time, when we didn't need user stories, we had legible tickets that made sense with acceptance criteria that made sense too. I'd say make sure your grooming is spot on. It's just spend time in these areas.
The next question we have is from Madeline. She asks, as the AC, did you feel more of a responsibility to keep up morale?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. You burden the shoulder of this thing. You feel almost, you're an emotional roller coaster all the time. So yes, in short, your highs are the team's highs, your lows are the team's lows. I like to be emotionally invested in the team. I don't like a robotic approach, because it means that I'm passionate and I really want to drive this through. I'm not saying that approach is correct, but you got to understand different people's personality types too. And I actually advocate that, but it's okay to show when you're sad. I'm not angry. We don't advocate that kind of behavior, but to show if you're sad, then people can appreciate that and have your back. And also just to ask open questions. So when you say check-ins, it's not just a tick box exercise. We ended up knowing about each other's personal life, especially through this as well. How we regulated that, though, is to make sure that on paper, we also had people that could back us up. So if I went on leave, vice versa, or on different areas, it was the handshakes to say, yeah, this person has our back. And what was powerful is that we have a lot of team members that could guide a project, work in the project. They have skill sets that are specific to them as well. So I used to be a developer, a business analyst. I like to be a PM. That's my specialism, I'd say. But what we see is the other specialisms have a broad base of other activities. So no one person felt overburdened. We could democratize quite a bit. And that's something that we are particularly selective of when we're starting off projects. Cool. Anything else?
No other questions from the participants. I was just wondering, before we move on, do any of the other panelists have any questions they'd like to ask?
I just typed one in, actually. I was curious, Abdul. I know that Zendesk, for example, I know that Zendesk have their own chat stuff built in, for example. We use Zendesk ourselves, and I just wondered how, if you went for like a kind of pre-build versus buy, and how you decided whether to kind of build that out yourself versus sort of reusing existing components and stuff like that.
It's a good question. So I'll take two lenses. I'll take a technical and a commercial lens really quickly. We had a architect technically assess the feasibility of 3 major options. We had a few internal through external. They just did a pros and cons list to understand what would be beneficial. Then we did a cost benefit analysis to understand then, based if this is the best one, then is the return really going to be worth it? And that's how we came to our conclusion. We kept it quite empirical, but yeah, and it helped that we had existing vendor relationships there. So cool. Thanks for that, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Really interesting talk, and really like the interactive part of the talk as well. So thank you for that. Right, up next we've got Ben from Vodafone. So I'll let you take it away.
Hey, cheers, John. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Not the speaker view, the actual screen. Is it all working?
Yes, all good.
Cool. Yeah, Abza, I really enjoyed that. You had a huge focus on people and culture, and I thought it was really special, because that's something that we've noticed throughout lockdown is probably the most important element, is actually the team morale. So it's really cool to hear that you guys have been focusing on that as well. So hi, everybody. My name's Ben. I'm an Agile coach and a Scrum Master at Vodafone UK. I'm not talking specifically today about Agile in lockdown as such, but I think there's a lot of values that can transfer across. I'm actually talking about quite a contentious issue, which is T-shaping. T-shaping, cross-skilling, whatever you want to call it. It's basically, as an individual, are you fixed on one skill set, or do you have a broad skill set so that in your squad you can attack lots of different user stories that come into the team? I'm going to share with you a story about an experiment that we ran with some of the guys at Vodafone UK. Let's see if I can go to the next slide. There we go. This is a real team. So, and I'm proving it's a real team because I've got all their pictures, and there's me at the top of the back. We were go-karting. I actually won, which was a miracle because I'm quite a big guy. So my power to weight ratio isn't great on a kart. But this is a team that I've been with for a couple of years. And I look at Agile from a slightly different lens because this is a commercial digital marketing team. So it's not a pure development team, which you often find using Agile. These guys are a mixture of commercial managers, big data scientists, digital analytics, comms, design, front-end development, you name it. It's a really mixed bunch. And we've seen Agile work really well. But this team specifically are responsible for retention digital marketing campaigns. So Cerberus, if any of you are familiar, is the three-headed dog that guards the gates of Hades. So read into that what you want, but that's the name that they chose to give themselves when we formed a few years ago. This team, in a couple of retrospectives, were bringing out that they wanted to T-shape more, because with those very specific skill sets, you would not have a lot of crossover naturally between like a big data scientist and a graphic designer, or a commercial manager and a copywriter. So although we were a cross-functional collaborative team, sometimes there did feel like handovers within the team. And actually on quite a few occasions, the guy says, we quite like to T-shape, we quite like to cross-skill. But in reality, this team are really busy. There's a lot of pressure. Almost anything that we do as a business, there is some kind of aspect on our customer base, or we have to send out communications. So it's high pressure. So T-shaping and cross-skilling normally got pushed to the back of the priority list. It didn't make it very far up the backlog a lot of the time. So we were having a retrospective, and the guys got really fed up, and they just said, we really want to T-shape. So we came up with an idea to run an experiment. And I put a bit of a tweak on this experiment because I was fed up of hearing them say again, we want to T-shape, we want to T-shape, we want to T-shape, and then it getting deprioritized. So I came up with an experiment whereby we would spend a couple of days doing a swarm around a real epic. So it was a real piece of work. And there was going to be a rule that you could not work on your own job, or your own discipline, as we call it. So if you're a big data scientist, you can't do big data science. You've got to do something else. If you're a graphic designer, you can't do graphic design. You get the picture. This was a tangible, real epic that we broke down into user stories. And using our kind of historical velocity, we were able to say fairly confidently that this was an achievable epic in a few days. We should be able to get a tangible product increment ready. It blew the guys' minds a little bit that they weren't going to be working on their own jobs, and that was quite difficult to get their heads around. But it was almost like an excited moment where they were looking at me and the product owner like, oh, you know, are we really allowed to do this? And we were like, yes, we can do it. So we created a backlog, and we got stuck in. This is what most of the swarm actually, or the mini sprint, whatever you want to call it, this is what most of the swarm looked like. It was groups of 2s and 3s gathering around one laptop. And in this instance, for example, here at the front, we've got George and Marvin. And George is a digital analytics manager, and Marvin is a campaign operations manager. So very different job roles. And actually, George was learning how to do campaign operations, like sending out all the emails to our customer base. And Marvin was learning about how we do digital analytics, how we analyze customers going through the funnel, and so on. And that happened in pairs and threes throughout the swarm. Now, I've got to admit, I wasn't hugely optimistic about getting everything done. I thought it was a stretch. I thought it was going to be really tough. But actually, what we started to see over those couple of days is the backlog moving pretty quickly across the board and into done. And we had some great moments where we were actually having 2 to 3 stand-ups in a day, where we'd have a stand up in the morning. We'd have a quick stand up after lunch just to check in and see if the pairs needed to switch, who was going to attack which story next. We do a stand up at the end of the day just to check in again around the board. It was really awesome to see. It was very collaborative. But we got to the end of the swarm, and the team had actually managed to do pretty much all of what was in the backlog. So this was a real campaign that we needed to send out, and it actually got delivered. We really did send out this campaign. So the team felt really awesome. We did a fantastic retrospective that one of the team members actually, she T-shaped with me as a Scrum Master, and she delivered a retrospective. So that's Adina, you can see her there, stood with her arms folded, and she delivered a fantastic retrospective. And the team were really great at understanding that they developed a load of empathy that they'd never had before. You know, the struggles that they each faced in their roles, and actually being able to share in that. Oh, I didn't realize this system was so clunky to use, or I didn't realize you had that pressure from that stakeholder, or whatever else it was. So we had a really brilliant reflective session, and it really did switch the mood in the squad in terms of having more empathy and understanding, as well as obviously learning a few new skills. So I was quite proud, but there was something that just didn't add up, because I, as a Scrum Master, I'm looking at things like velocity, love them or hate them. We use story points. They've worked really well for us. I'm sure I get a load of abuse about story points because there's a whole no estimation movement going on, but story points work for us, and they've been good. So we know our velocity now. We took in 158 story points in this little mini sprint. We took a couple of stories out pretty much straight away because we realized that we couldn't actually do them. So the 89% represents the amount of work that we did versus what we planned. Now, 89% by our standards was great. We normally aim for 80% or above, and I think by most people's standards, it's a fantastic result. So there was only a couple of things that didn't quite make it over the line, but the MVP was there, the epic was delivered, and we were really happy. Now, I started adding up and calculating what that meant for average story points delivered per day. Now, in a normal sprint, I've got 2 years of data that shows that in an average day, this squad will deliver about 37 story points. That's 37 story points will move into done in an average sprint day. Now, this same squad in the T-shaping days, so in these swarm days, delivered on average 61 points in a day. And I calculated and I calculated, and I thought I'd made a mistake, so I calculated again. But it was accurate. They'd actually delivered 65% more in a day on average during this T-shaping sprint than they had in a normal sprint. And I'll be honest, I was really confused, and it kind of worried me because effectively I was thinking these guys are 65% more productive when they're not even doing their own jobs. And that really sent me into a bit of a panic. Like, we are literally proving here that these guys are going to be more effective doing something that they've never been trained to do. Because these guys, I was anticipating it would be half, because you're either going to spend your time learning a new skill or teaching someone else a skill. So in my mind, I just thought it's going to be roughly half as effective, but no, 65% more productive when not doing their own jobs. So we put this back to the team at the end of the retrospective. And actually what came out was that the multitasking that this team do in a normal sprint is a real detriment. Now, we're normally juggling a few different epics. There's a few different demands. It could be a new device launch and we need to send marketing out for it. It could be a regulatory change and we need to send out communications. It could be ongoing optimization of campaigns that we send to customers. So there's normally a few different things going on, which mean the squads are often juggling a few different epics. And actually what this mini sprint or this swarm enabled the guys to do was focus on one thing at a time. It was one epic. Everyone in the room, regardless of whether they were developing the content, the design for the email, or whether they were working on the big data models to figure out who we were going to send this campaign to, they were all working on the same thing. So they could shout across the room at each other, ask questions, and everyone was focused. And I don't think I need to explain to a virtual room full of Scrum Masters and Agile enthusiasts, the benefits of focusing and doing one thing at a time. So this was a huge learning. Not only was there the empathy, the collaboration, the T-shaping very practically, but there was also this huge revelation for the squad that we need to get more focus. And actually it shifted the way that the team looked at the backlog. Can we get it down to more of a focused backlog? Can we make sure we limit what's in a sprint to 1 or 2 different epics at tops. Like, how can we do that? This experiment really proved the point and got them thinking differently. So you might be thinking, what can I do? Because not everyone gets approval to take 2 or 3 days out with a team and try some wacky experiment. But the first thing that I would say is experiment. And it's easier said than done, but be brave and be bold. Wherever you can, take an opportunity to try something new. We are in a day and age where if we don't try new things, we're just going to fall by the wayside and the competition is going to eat us up. So we need to be bold with our experiments as Scrum Masters, as Agile coaches, as Agile delivery managers. We need to get bold with experiments. I can't recommend it enough. Secondly, focus. Oh, I've nudged the next 2 along. Okay, you're all going to be looking at the girl doing her stretches now. But secondly is focus. If you want to win 5 tugs of war with your team, and you divide up and you put one person on each tug of war, you're never going to win. You need to do one at a time. And it's really the same when we do sprint work. You need to focus on one thing at a time, get it done, get everyone around it. It's far more efficient. And we've seen that in our team. And thirdly is time. It takes a long time to get comfortable running experiments. It takes a long time to T-shape. It takes a long time to build that psychological safety as a team. So don't panic thinking that you've got to do this all in a day, and don't panic thinking just because you run one experiment or one T-shaping session that the team haven't quite bought in yet. Be patient, invest in that team, take them on a journey, practice. I'm sure this girl probably couldn't do that after a couple of hours. I'm sure it's taken her years, and I'm going to move along just because it's probably freaking some people out. Finally, I'm just going to do a bit of a plug, really. I started a website with a few guys that I actually worked with at Vodafone. A couple of them were on this call. So big up Robin, Kat, Amy. We were working together at Vodafone. We saw Agile work really well, and we decided, let's make a website and let's put some great content out there to share the good stuff that we've seen with other people. So if you grab your phone out and you head to the camera, and if you point the camera at that QR code, it will take you to our LinkedIn page. We'd love it if you followed us. We'd love it if you engage with some of our content and let us know your thoughts. On the website, there is a much more detailed blog about the extreme T-shaping experiment. It's got some of the data, it's got some of the ups and downs, and you can read more about the extreme T-shaping experiment there. Love it if you guys get involved. Love it if you comment on our content and let us know your thoughts. I think there's a lot of angst sometimes in the Agile community, and people like to get particular about terminology and the Agile manifesto. And actually what we love is just seeing a difference in the lives of teams and people, because Agile puts people first. And that's fantastic when you've got a team that love their culture, when you've got a team that reflect and they respect each other and their psychological safety. It just makes work incredible. Like kind of Abdul was saying earlier, when you've got that culture of looking out for one another, it just makes all the difference. And so we really believe in that. So we try and share content that encourages that as well. So I'd love to see loads of you guys pop up on my phone later following Agile Avengers on LinkedIn. We post blogs for Scrum Masters, product owners, teams, organizations. We try and share our learnings. There's a few of us that contribute to the site from in Vodafone and outside of Vodafone. And what I find really helpful actually is we have a section for retrospective ideas. So when I was first a Scrum Master, I was always scouring the internet for new retrospective ideas. And actually what we try to build is a bit of an archive or a library of retrospective ideas that you guys can try with your teams. There's a few in there that are particularly good for remote working. So they've come out of the remote working phase we've been through. So again, go through those, use some of them. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback on whether they worked or not and how they went down with your team. And then finally, I would love to chat with you guys. I'd love to connect. I think it's great when people share stuff, share experiments, share stories, share successes, failures, learning. So again, if you've got your phone out, scan the QR code, it will just take you through to my LinkedIn, hit connect. I'd love to connect with you guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Again, I'd love to see my phone popping off with connection requests, because I think it's really good that as an Agile community, we share what's going on. So thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it wasn't fully Agile and lockdown focused, but I hope that it's been interesting, and I hope that my selective use of GIFs has given you a bit of a smile for a Thursday evening. John, should we do a couple of questions?
Sure, and I'd just like to say I've checked out the Agile Avengers as well, looked at some content, really good, and it's really useful for people who are just entering the Agile world as well. So yeah, really recommend it. So yeah, I think it'd be good to start from the panelists. Have any of you guys got a question or questions you'd like to ask Ben?
Yeah, it's me again. Pop it open. So yeah, I'm really curious actually, like how this, obviously seeing how this worked out, because obviously the cliche of T-shaped people is you know, you need lots of different people and you fill up your different bars of your tea and stuff like that. But I've always seen that as being like you hire different types of people into your team, and you kind of have really diverse hiring and make sure that you cover all the bases, and you don't just have like a load of people that do the same thing. So I guess it's more like how you came to the decision to say, actually, well, what we're really going to do is we're going to ask people to effectively step out of their comfort zone, which obviously isn't for everyone, right? So like whether you got any resistance but also how you kind of came to that decision rather than trying to maybe make a squad of really mixed people.
So I think the thing with T-shaping is that in theory it sounds lovely, but in practice it's probably never going to happen, because there's no way that someone can go to university and get a master's in big data science and then come out and be expected to T-shape with a graphic designer who's just been to university and studied design. And when we're building digital products or we're building development products, often you need those mix of skills. And if we're going to apply Agile to a bunch of different companies, environments, you're going to have those different skills. So I think for us, it was less about can we, do T-shaping in its purest fashion, but more, can we get a bit more of an understanding and a bit more empathy, so that when we're building a product or we're looking at a new campaign, even though you've got two very different skill sets, when we're sat in those planning sessions, the big data scientist can have some empathy with the designer when it comes to scoping out what the campaign is going to look like. And actually there's more of a fluid conversation the whole way through, rather than I'm only going to pay attention when it's the design part, or I'm only going to pay attention when it's the commercial aspect of this build. So that was kind of how we viewed it. We've recognized we're never going to hire completely T-shaped individuals, but it was about the empathy, the collaboration. And I think we've been looking and trying to develop the right attitudes in our teams, that if you want to come in and just sit in a corner and do your own thing, you're probably not going to fit here, because we want people who are collaborative. We want people who are up for learning new things. So that's kind of been our approach. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I'll probably just not question, but supporting statement to that is, it's when, did you find that people were just genuinely interested in a new area, right? We've seen that too. And if they're interested, they want to learn and they want to take on micro tasks, which means that if someone wants to go on holiday or someone gets sick during COVID, for example, you've got that stuff. Is that what were the kind of, I'd like to almost know the wow moments when they started, you had those two guys sitting at the front of the table. Do you have any quotes or any eureka moments you could share as well?
I think the wow moments, I'm just going to go back to this slide, because I think this probably shows it here. So basically the retrospective we divided up a big piece of poster chart into 4, got the guys to do self-portraits for a bit of a laugh, just to change things up. And each section was something different. So it was learn, change, and I think it was surprised and recommend. So everyone moved around and they added in some comments to each other's posters. What did I learn about your role? What would I change about your role? What surprised me about your role? What would I recommend? And so there was just so many eureka moments of like, I never realized that system was so difficult and that took so long to do. I wouldn't put so much pressure on you if I'd have known that thing crashes every half an hour. Is there any way I can help you? Is there anything I can do to make your life easier along that process? That for me, I think, and for the team, was probably the biggest thing. It was the empathy. And since then, it's just been so much less tension and such more a collaborative way of working. So I think that was it.
Honestly, that's worth its weight in gold when you've got the external climate being like it is, right? And I think it's for all of us something. If you could add that as or you've got an experiment on your website, I think we all want to try that a little bit, or hopefully most of us are like, let's try this so people can take a page out of Dale Carnegie's book and say, right, how do other people actually feel, and what are they going through, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
We've just got a few questions from the audience. So Ali asks, do you think T-shaping would work remotely too?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, might be trickier because we're already staring at screens a lot, and to stare at a screen for longer to learn someone else's role is going to be tricky. But absolutely, I think you can still encourage people to collaborate more. In a similar way, what we've ended up with is two people sat around one laptop, one person's teaching, the other person's learning. That doesn't feel very efficient, because you think, well, if you just did your job and I did mine, then we probably get more done. But actually, you have to put an investment in to get a long-term benefit. And that's going to be the same whether we're remote or not. So if we're remote and two people want a T-shape, they're going to have to block some time out where one person is teaching and the other person's learning. And that's going to be tough either way. So I definitely still think you can do it. In terms of facilitating an activity or a session like that, you're going to have to get a bit more creative, use a tool like Mural, which Abdur was demonstrating earlier. But you can definitely still do it. It just requires that bravery for the initial investment in some time to get a longer term benefit.
Cool. And very last question from Dina. She asked, any idea how we can try T-shaping for dev teams where you have B, FE and test engineers?
Oh, Dina, that's a tough one. I've not actually worked with pure dev teams. I've been working with business teams, commercial teams. So I probably wouldn't be best placed to answer that question, actually. I don't know if Jason or Abdur has got any thoughts.
I think from my perspective, and I actually put it in the chat as well, and it's obviously really common for there to be people that have specialisms in certain areas because, of course, you know, they've learned a certain stack, and they've really specialized in that stack, and that's really beneficial because it means that people can do really cool work in those areas. But I guess where I see it's maybe just a second level of T or some other letter or something like that. But like the fact that you want to avoid handoffs in any kind of sort of agile development, because any handoff is going to cause some kind of delay effectively because you're waiting for someone else to take a thing on. So I think the thing that I would really advocate myself is that front-end developers learn some back-end development. They don't have to be like all of a sudden like the best data engineer in the world or something like that, but that they have some kind of knowledge that they can use to sort of tie the front end to the back end and vice versa. Because from my perspective, the fewer handoffs you can have in your development process, the quicker that process is going to be, because you don't have the kind of the overload of having to keep passing stuff backwards and forwards and waiting for people to be available. You just fix it yourself. And it's tough because people don't always have that mindset, or they don't have the skills in those areas, or maybe you're using a library or a platform or a language that's just different, but it just feels really, it's almost like a sub T of the big T. I mean, I still think that people should have business sense and UX sense and customer sense, all that other sense, but just having that kind of micro sense of, well, different types of the same bit of the T, so different types of development is really useful.
Yeah, just want to build on that really quickly. We just get our devs to shadow each other on core tasks. And what we tend to do is we give them a task, just like Ben was doing as well. It's usually when you release a product. So sometimes when you have a vendor that will have a specific skill set and we have an internal team that doesn't have it, a lot of us call it knowledge transfer, but we specifically give tasks in order to create the knowledge transfer through practical experience. And also we try to, I think we're stepping a bit away from terminology like front end, back end. We like this, I use this term personally called unicorn individuals, where you have a broad-based understanding of, for example, object-oriented code, but then a basis of design understanding of front end. So if you can try to cultivate more of that mindset through practical experience and through just putting them on some courses as well, I think that will benefit the team, because then you sometimes only need one person versus needing two sets of developers. And we've seen that work well at Shell.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Ben, for the talk and some really interesting questions there and some really interesting discussions. So
pleasure. Thanks, John.
No worries. Last up, we've got Jason, who's going to be giving a talk. Take it away. Jason, you're on mute.
There we go. Let me. I was just complaining to myself about being unable to share my screen, but we're there now. I don't know if you can see it. We all good?
Yep, all good.
Yeah, got it, John.
Super. Right. Okay. Thanks. Thanks everyone else for some really interesting talks. I'm more from the product side, so obviously the enemy of developers and Scrum Masters abound, but I thought I'd spend a little bit of time talking about some of the experiences of how we've been as a company and as a team kind of coping through the current sort of crisis effectively. I mean, I will say that the coronavirus situation has been a completely unexplained crisis, and it's interesting because back at the beginning of the year, I actually had an episode where like half my face stopped working for a few weeks. Like, it's called Bell's palsy. It's just something that can happen, and that was for me like the worst thing that was going to happen that year. And then all of a sudden, everything else happened that year, and it's just been a complete car crash. And I'm obviously really I really hope that every single person on this call, everyone that's working for all the different types of companies on this call, are having a really, they're coming out of it, because it's been horrible in many ways, and I hope that you're all okay. Just kind of setting the scene a little bit. So who I am. That's the only acceptable picture of me these days. Any other picture just gets older, like in a novel. So I head the product team at a company called Black Swan Data. So a slightly different type of company to the other presenters tonight. Much smaller, much newer. My own personal background: I'm a rehabilitated developer and nerd. So I've spent a lot of time in my past working in analytics and working in sort of operations management, moving into sort of full stack web development, and then into product over the years. So really starting to move over the years into not just developing the stuff that we want to give to people, but actually starting to understand why that's actually important to develop, and getting really interested in the roadmap and really trying to understand our users. So it's been an interesting journey, and I've worn a lot of hats in my time, but in the kind of spirit of T-shaped people, I think it's been really helpful for my career to make sure that I understand kind of what's going on and what's important. Been at Black Swan Data for about 18 months. I started beginning of last year. Just now, since no one's heard of Black Swan, just a brief description of what we're doing, so you again can understand maybe some of the challenges that I'm going to be talking about. I've actually got kind of three arms. I work for Black Swan Data, so the top right, and we're basically a machine learning powered, AI powered trend analytics and prediction platform. So we offer solutions to our customers, which are very large consumer goods companies, so people that sell stuff in shops and pubs and bars and restaurants, and try and tell them what things they should be looking at next. What's the big trends in their category based on social conversation, publicly available news articles and stuff like that. We've also got another couple of arms, so Feather, who do a lot of really cool stuff in aviation, and White Swan, who I'd love to talk to you about later, because that's a charity that we also run, working in the sort of healthcare space and using prediction to really understand how to help make people know what's wrong with them and how they can get better. So I will say that it's been a really interesting time over the last few years, but as I said, we're really working in two kind of core verticals, sort of consumer goods, so things that people are selling in shops, and planes. And I'll say that again, consumer goods and planes, and I'll say it again, consumer goods and planes, because that'll be relevant in a minute. But I also say that by the beginning of Q1, or coming into this year, we were doing really well. We had a really good 2019 with a really strong growth. We're growing our SaaS business, we were growing our professional services business, really getting a lot of big clients on board and really knocking it out of the park. And we were looking to come into 2020 strong, and we were looking to really scale even further and really get it over the line. We had strong strategic alignment from the top down. We had good company strategy. We had all of our core KPIs. We had recently reshuffled, changed our ways of working and reshuffled into squads aligned around certain missions. So, kind of, really optimizing the way that we worked. And we'd had a really cool roadmap built out that showed all of the features that we needed to do. Everything was looking fantastic, really rosy. Everything was on point. And then we got punched in the mouth. Now, I love this quote, and I don't know if Mike Tyson actually said it or if it's another sort of faster horse type quote, but I think it's really relevant because ultimately it really shows in some ways the kind of the fallacy of planning, because of course any plan immediately gets disrupted as soon as it actually meets the outside world. So yeah, Mike Tyson, if you did say that, it's got a signature. I guess he probably did, but thank you. But obviously the opponent in this case was the Armageddon itself, coronavirus. So it's obviously been a complete nightmare for everyone. I mean, I don't know how many people we have on this call that have been affected directly or furloughed or their companies have been having trouble, but it's obviously been a complete nightmare. And I really feel for all of the people that have been affected. But you only have to look on LinkedIn to see some of the, all the green swooshes and stuff, all the people that have been laid off. And it's been quite a bad time. But as a company, obviously, we've done the best we can to really weather the storm. And we're a small company with big clients, so we need to make sure that we're pushing in the right direction to make sure that we're making the right decisions, keep moving forward, and try and just get through it as best we can. And that's really relevant for a company that works with consumer goods companies and airlines for most of its trade, because obviously that industry has been completely trashed, or both of those industries have been completely trashed over the last few months with the recession and all the problems in the aviation industry. We're lucky, we've got some really good clients and we've got some really good partnerships. So it's not like it was a massive disaster for us, but it's obviously still a concern. You really want to be in a situation where your clients are being strong so that you can keep, getting the revenue to keep turning the handle and keep delivering the features that are going to really be giving the best value to those people. So definitely an interesting time. So maintaining a roadmap, that's the first bullet point on my chat. So really just obviously just concentrating a little bit on like how we try to maintain continuity. So I would say that one of the biggest rules of product management is to make sure that you're almost like a bastion of stability. You're there to kind of stand as a wall against the potential avalanche of customer requirements, and obviously all of the internal requirements, all of the feature requests. And the most important thing that any product person can do in this sort of situation, or in any sort of situation, is don't panic, keep it calm. You've got it. Just calm it down and apply product principles to make sure that you're going through it in the right way. And I guess the question then would be, well, what is a roadmap? So there's 5 billion Medium posts about a roadmap and what a roadmap is and what a roadmap isn't. Is a roadmap a project plan? Is it a Gantt chart? I mean, I love the there's a quote from, so I think it was from I don't know, it was from someone basically saying that a Gantt chart is an amazing, wonderfully crafted graphic that immediately goes out of date as soon as you save it. It's just completely irrelevant by the time you've published it, because it immediately changes. Is it just an Excel sheet full of tasks? Probably not. Is it a list of just the coolest sounding stuff, or the things that your competitors are doing that your CEO was interested in? I would say myself, it should be none of those things. So roadmap it's a strategic document. It's a document that shows you where your team and your company needs to go and what you and your teams need to do to get there. So some things that were important before all this happened remain important today. So that means you don't just sit there and say, all of a sudden, everyone's screaming, everyone's hair's on fire. We need to immediately start just doing anything, running around in random directions and just trying to hope that you can just survive. Because some things are just important and you do still need to keep doing them. So there are things, for example, in our company, we're an enterprise sale. We work with a lot of big companies, and we had a lot of features that we'd already planned in. Things like SSO, which whilst not exactly the most glamorous feature, was a big kind of stickiness unlock with our clients. So we really wanted to make sure that we got that over the line. We were working a lot on sort of new use cases and driving new opportunities for upselling and cross-selling, lots of sort of platform improvements, fixing technical debt. You can't just stop doing these just because there's with global pandemic. I mean, frankly, that's as good a reason as any, but you should still stick to your principles. But you do have to beware the sunk cost fallacy or the gambler's fallacy. You can't just sit there and do it because you were working on it, because ultimately a product roadmap, a plan, it's not something that you just sit there and bake it in at the beginning of the year. It's the concrete sets and you're done. It's something that you should always be conscious of the fact that just because you started working on something doesn't mean you have to finish. There's always a chance to switch. It comes on to my next point around pragmatism. So by that, what I mean is that ultimately, the first rule of product and product management is your job isn't to stick to a plan so much as to find your user's most valuable problem and solve it. Now, my biggest takeout here would be to look exactly where that apostrophe is. It's not a user's most valuable problem, it's all of your users' most valuable problem, or the majority of your users' most valuable problem. Obviously, the thing is with our users, which I'll come to in a minute, is that actually their biggest problem, all of a sudden wasn't anything that we had on the roadmap. Their biggest problem for all of these companies that we're working with was, what the hell do we do now the COVID's here? You're a predictive analytics company. You're here to tell us what the future holds and where we should place our money and where we should place our bets. So, well, that's a really important thing. So we obviously had to take account of that in our output. So we refocused some of our squads, or at least one of our squads, around trying to answer that question. So using some of the data that we had and using some of the data scientists that we have in the squads, and really shuffled those around to make sure that we had the right people in the right place to do the right research, the right development, to actually make sure that we were answering those questions for people. And it gave us lots of great advantages. It helped us to kind of prop up the proposition that we offer for our professional services. You know, all of the people that were getting consulting outputs from us, they were desperate to know about COVID and what that meant to them. And we were able to provide the consulting team with information about that. And it also gave us really valuable inputs for our product, for our SaaS platform. So we were able to incorporate some of that work into our SaaS platform and come out of the back of it with a really strong, much improved offering, which really helped us to demonstrate value, and obviously really helped us with sales conversations as well. I think that actually, whilst having to change things unexpectedly is kind of inconvenient, at the same time it's really helpful when it drives actual innovation. So I don't want there to be pandemics all the time, but it certainly drives things in the face of necessity. I guess the thing I'd say is also, just from a roadmap perspective, I mean, obviously it's not controversial to say you shouldn't fall in love with it. You know, you have to change it. If the most valuable problem changes, then it's definitely time to change up, but do that based on actual information and trying to identify the most important thing to solve. So a little bit of a pivot now into communication, and actually touching on some of the points that some of the other speakers have spoken about regarding kind of communication and culture to some extent. So I feel that in many ways the product team's one of its main jobs is playing a role in communication between different parts of the business. I mean, there's that stupid Venn diagram with the dot in the middle, the you are here, the view stuck between all different parts of the business, and it's obviously valid to some extent. I think it's really important to make sure that you're facilitating those discussions and facilitating that communication to make sure that everyone's on board, especially in times of change. So, we need to keep our users informed. We need to make them aware of any changes to the roadmap, because whilst the roadmap should never be set in stone, at the same time, you need to make sure that when the stones shift, that people are aware of that. And you also need to maintain alignment with the stakeholders, with all of our cross-functional teams, all of the colleagues. We've got 5 squads in our company working on different parts of the platform. You need to make sure that they're all aligned and all pulling in the right direction. And again, some of that kind of matches up to some of the discussions that we've been having earlier tonight. So I guess one of the things, first of all, that we were really conscious of within the company and really tried to do well within the product team is really doubling down on the communication, making sure that everyone's in touch, because all of a sudden we're all remote. No one can see each other anymore. No one can just have a quick chat anymore. Everything's a meeting, and that's fine, apart from when it's not. And ultimately, after a while, I don't know about anyone else on this call, but I started to feel a bit of kind of cognitive load. Because I'm every single time I need to talk to anyone, I've got to set up a 30-minute Zoom meeting. And that's not always helpful. So some of these things were things we were already doing, but we really tried to double down on some of the communication strategies that we'd identified before. So one of the things that we found quite helpful as a team is like a product stand-up. And I think that was one of the cards on the board that we saw earlier, like actually having effectively a 15-minute stand-up every day for the product team. It's not really a stand-up because the stand-ups are the stand-ups. They're in the squads. But actually sitting there and spending the time, regular as clockwork, to just sit there and talk about things that are important to us as a team, making sure we don't have any blockers, and frankly, just having a quick chance to have a chat. It's been really useful. We also tried to replicate the kind of more water cooler thing. I think I saw another card on the previous previous board about like trying to replicate that more kind of potluck chat. Set up a Discord server, tried to be cool gamers, didn't really work. Everyone just left it on mute all the time, so we turned that off. Company have started doing things like random lotteries of coffee and stuff like that. I just think that one of the things, whilst I'm really comfortable working from home, from my perspective, there's still so many benefits from working in the office. And I'm not one of these like LinkedIn people that just sit there saying, I've saved £5,000 and I'm working from home all the time and I'm never going back to the office. I'm fine working from home, but I think that sometimes you do miss that kind of one-to-one ability to just have a spitball a problem. And you've got to keep in touch with your squads as well. So one of the things that we also shook up was making sure, again, we have 5 squads. So we've got a lot of people working on different streams. And when you're in the office, that's fine. You can kind of hear what people are doing. You can look at what people are doing. You can talk to people. But again, everyone's remote. So we kind of shook that up and came up with what we've cheekily called the mega demo. So the mega demo was basically at the end of every sprint, we'd just get all of the teams to demo all at the same time, not literally all at the same time, but within the same meeting. And that really helped to drive some of the communication so that all of the people working on all of the different parts of our platform and our offering had a really good understanding of what all the other teams were working on. And obviously still going for the retros and obviously still maintain daily stand-ups and having really proactive working sessions so that we could always like swarm around an issue if we needed to. Keeping in touch with our stakeholders. I mean, I love this picture for many reasons, but it also obviously replicates the product manager's life in a nutshell. But one of the things that we've also really tried to keep up and really double down on is what we call a sort of show and tell session. So myself and the team will go out every 2 weeks and present to all hands. It's a webinar, we'll record it, share it, just let everyone know what we've been working on and then what we're going to be working on next. And then like a presentation at the end of, about like how the roadmap's looking, if anything's changing, any other generic news that's going to be affecting the product delivery. And I think that that's been a really fantastic way of just making sure that the company's aligned both with what we're currently doing and how we're tracking against the company vision. So if anyone's not doing a show and tell type session as sort of an agile or delivery / product team, I would definitely recommend it to try and drive that stakeholder alignment. And also, yeah, this keeping in touch with our customers. So I mean, obviously the customers are those that pay the bills, and I don't know why that's a Bitcoin now. I should have chosen different. Oh, they're all cryptocurrencies, damn it. But basically, making sure that you're keeping in touch with customers, because ultimately the product cliche is that your customers are your most important people, and of course they are. They pay the bills. They're the ones that you're trying to serve. So making sure that as product people, you're maintaining the best practice of talking to your customers all the time, having your sessions, looking at your customer activity and data to make sure that you're really in line or in touch with their needs. Because I personally think that any product team that isn't constantly in touch with either the internal or external customers, users of the platform, is missing a part of its remit. And I guess the final point on communication is just don't be scared to over-egg it. I think there's a real trend, I guess, to try to not repeat yourself or not to bore people, and obviously I'm failing at that at the moment. But at the same time, just making sure that you keep everyone up to date. And frankly, you can never say something enough. From my perspective, if you're not bored of hearing it yourself, you've probably not said it enough times. There's loads of reasons why people won't have remembered what you're saying or have a solid idea about every single aspect. Just keep saying it, keep sharing it, keep making sure that everyone's aligned and on board. Take questions when you can, and just make sure that you're hitting the communication as much as possible, because you can't do it enough. And I guess the final point is about coming out strong. I know I'm nearly at time. I don't want to get in trouble. It has been a hard few months, and obviously we're still terrified of this sort of second dip or second spike, and what's coming next. And we have to be conscious, of course, that again, lots of companies have had trouble. Lots of our colleagues, again, you see it on LinkedIn. There's the people are in trouble. But most importantly, from all of this, and again, I touched on this earlier, is just for the kind of the concept that you really just need to be able to come out stronger and use the things that you learn and the improved ways of working, the optimizations that you had to put in place to keep yourself going. Try and use the best of those to move forward and keep servicing what you're doing. So there's things like optimizing how we work and collaborate. Someone touched on it earlier, sort of enabling asynchronous communication. There's plenty of reasons why people aren't going to be able to just communicate in meetings all the time. There's going to be people that have childcare responsibilities. There's going to be ebbs and flows in people's workloads. And I think it's just really important to make sure that you lean into things like Slack and really double down a lot, but just double down on enabling that sort of thing. And also leaning into your empowered teams. So you can't just sit there micromanaging your teams, and you clearly shouldn't anyway. But if you do have remote teams, making sure that you give them the information that they need to do what they need to do, set up the feedback loops so that they can feed back to you and let you know if you need to course correct, and trust your teams to work and empower them to deliver. And they're using smart tooling. So just I saw this other thing earlier, I can't remember what it's called now, but I'm a big fan of things like Miro. So using platforms like that to really replace the kind of the whiteboarding and allow you to collaborate much more effectively. I'm sure there are plenty of other tools, but that's the one I use. And the last slide for me, just making sure that you're ready to go. So again, just taking the best of what we've learned and some of the ways that we've had to adapt our working practices, making sure that we're really focused on what the customer needs and answering their most important questions, and just really using, maybe as we come out of some of the hell that we've been in the last few months, just really using what we've learned to keep driving forward, refocus, concentrate on what's important, and just go forward and just keep delivering value. And that's me. If you're not bored, and I can't hear you, so I'll have to presume that you're not, there's a few ways to follow me. I actually put this LinkedIn thing in at the last minute because I saw it and it looked cool. So I had to try and work out how to do that very quickly. But there's a few ways to contact me, and obviously if anyone is interested in finding out about our sort of healthcare charity, I'd be happy to chat about that, or obviously you can click on their link and find out for yourself. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, we have one from Parul. So that they asked, do you think work from home impacts innovation, as you can't have those spontaneous chats, collaborations with people that you would do when you're in the office?
I think it's obviously more difficult, and it is a really traditional way of looking at things, to sit there and say, oh well, let's all sit around the WeWork bar, beer taps, and have a chat and innovate, and all the ideas crackle above our head, and obviously that is fun, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, I think that for me it's all about that point about sort of leaning into the really leaning into it. So really leaning into tools and ways. So one of the things I will say is that we're a distributed company anyway. So we've got offices in Hungary, we've got offices in America, sort of West and East Coast. We've got offices in different parts of England. So part of it was kind of natural anyway. We've always had to work remotely and kind of try and get that crackle across a Zoom link or equivalent. I think that to be frank, maybe that was something we didn't do always amazingly before. And one of the things that I would say that we've got out of this is kind of going for the kind of one remote, all remote type rule, which, I mean, it's not a rule, but more of a guideline. Like, if we can sit there and make sure that everyone's engaged, that you've not got like 9 people in a room all crackling and one person on the line just barely hearing people. So sort of concentrating on those tools, using some of the really fantastic sort of collaboration tools and kind of online sharing and online idea optimization boards and all that stuff. Is it the same as all sitting around a table, drinking lattes and scribbling stuff down on a pad? Probably not. But at the same time, I think as long as you lean into it and you really push that kind of remote collaboration and the remote tools, then there's plenty out there to help you get that done these days.
The next question from Hamid, they say, do you think more companies will adopt Agile, considering the pandemic has caused people to adopt new ways of working?
So I think that lots of companies either think they are or are trying to be Agile. And obviously there's doing Agile, there's being Agile, there's all the different types of Agile. And there's obviously lots of cliches about like the types of Agile transformations that some, especially bigger companies, can find themselves in. From my perspective, I think that Agile is definitely the way that people are going, even if it's just Agile in name only, because for me, I think it's enough of the zeitgeist that just people aren't gonna. I don't think there are any fans of waterfall working unless it's in really regulated industries or industries that have really strict kind of seasonal stuff. Whether actually it's interesting because one of our some of our clients in the aviation industry, you've got to get stuff on planes. That's not easy to. You can't just continuously deploy to a plane. So there's obviously some level of kind of scheduling around that stuff and sort of good old-fashioned project management. But I think from my perspective, I can't really see that many people just sitting there choosing waterfall as a method unless they've got a really specialized use case. But I think also with regards to that question, it's like, well, yeah, sure. The pandemic and the new ways of working, I mean, you can waterfall remotely. I recommend it, but you can. I think it's more like, do I see that people are going to be encouraging more kind of distributed and remote working and remote collaboration? I absolutely think that. I think that there are a number of companies already that have said, well, you can work from home forever, or you can work from home for years or whatever. And I don't see that going away. I think that if the pandemic had been like a 2-day thing or something like that, it would have just been a blip and everything would have just carried on. But I think it's lasted for long enough now that it's going to have a sort of a seismic shift in attitudes, and because people have had to realize that people can basically do their jobs from home. Unless you're literally physically having to touch people, you can basically do your job at home, or if you have really specialized equipment. But even that could be replicated. So I think that it's going to be a massive trend going forward after we come out of this.
Could I think with you for a second there, Jason? So my challenge to everyone on the call is Agile Roundabout, but probably we apply it when it's needed. I think that's what you're coming to, right, Jason? And probably Ben thinking with you here is you have waterfall, you have lean, you have loads of different methodologies, but it's about when do you need this? So we're saying when an organization needs Agile, I'd actually rephrase that. My question to you is do organizations need to be more responsive and flexible to adapt to the economic situation, the changing demands of the customer? Jason mentioned something really pertinent by Marty Kagan as well. His book's Inspired, phenomenal. This guy's like the OG of product world. They don't really care about terms. Mm-hmm. It's a bit controversial, but all of us have learned them though. We've learned how to use and deploy them. So at the end of the day, it sounds like Jason, Ben, all of us are focused on where does the value sit and how do we pivot to find it? Because day one, like today, it's the value was in coffees, actual physical coffees, right? People were buying them. Now it's on delivery. Now it's on, can I get my coffee delivered to me? So can we change our business and our model to adapt to that? Or can we flex that? Because if we can't, that's where we're seeing retailers, older organizations that haven't been able to respond as quickly, literally just pulling out of physical locations. And I don't think that's a trend we're gonna see die out. We're gonna see Amazon and everyone, and we can see through the deregulation talks in the US right now with the big four, what's happening? Everyone's turning around and saying, well, these guys are going to get more powerful. In a way, it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. But Jason's pertinent point is pivot to where the customer is, and that's what I do. I'd advocate as well. It doesn't matter what you use.
I've just got one final thought, if that's okay, because I feel quite passionate about this. The question being, do you think companies adopt an agile way of working? I really believe that the generation coming into the workforce aren't going to want to work any other way. And the reason being, Agile values, it's people focused, it's fast and iterative, it's about working solutions, it's about the customer. The millennial generation have got the attention span of a teaspoon. Most of the guys that I started at Vodafone with around a similar kind of time, you know, lots of grads leaving university, the majority of them left after a year because they get bored and they want to move on to the next thing. So there's no way that you're going to be able to run projects with 2-year roadmaps where nothing exciting happens for a long time, because the workforce coming through, the young designers, developers, they'll just get bored and they'll go somewhere else. So I don't think companies are going to have a choice, because if they want to retain the workforce coming through who value that speed, who value that customer relationship, who value all those things that I think Agile has at its core, they're going to have to. I think they're going to have to adopt Agile, whether they like all the terminologies and the frameworks or not. They're going to have to adopt the Agile values and certainly a number of the principles.
And I was saying, Ben, you sound like an entrepreneur the way you're speaking. I think we all share a DNA strand here, is that we build stuff that people, we try to build stuff people want, and it's hard, right? It's really hard. And you're right though. It's we're seeing the general environment. If you have to have that balance between the environment and what has to be delivered. Just curious on a second, how have you addressed that? I know that we've got a few more minutes to chew the fat, but like I can empathize with that. That's one of the attraction points in a career. But have you put it as a strict measure on people you hire? Is it just something, do you try to almost see the cultural fit of people when you bring them into the organization? Just thinking with you.
It's a good point. A lot of our kind of HR marketing promotional stuff recently has been around, we're an Agile company, which has been great. We shifted a load of our operation from Newbury to London, which again was really good at attracting young talent in London. If I look around, I say I look around the office, I can't, but if I was in the office in London and I looked around the office, the majority of people would be fairly young. And I think they're probably staying around with us a little bit longer than perhaps they may do if it was a different working environment. So I think it's definitely something the business are doing. And I think whether they realize they're doing it well or not, they are doing it well. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason that lots of young people like to go and work for startups now. And, you know, it's not very fashionable to go and work for a bank. It's fashionable to go and work for Monzo, isn't it? So I think that's not just reflective of a trend, but it's reflective of the way of working. And it's not just beer fridges and ping pong tables, but
it's hard work.
It's the autonomy. It's the autonomy. It's the customer focus. It's the attitude, and I think the kind of the respect between the guys at the top and the guys doing the work, and I think that all stems from Agile values. So.
Yeah, I like the thing that you just said is there's not much middle fat, right? So, but one thing I was reading Jeff Bezos's first letter to shareholders. I got told about reading these recently, but he said something in that properly hits home, which is, when he's looking for people, he said, I want people that basically going to work hard, work smart, and work long hours. He said, if you're meeting only 2 of those, this isn't a place for you. But I think that's the balance, right? It is an intense environment though. If you get in there and you do this right, and you try and churn out products fast that succeed, but it doesn't mean it can't be fun. I think that's what you're alluding to. It can be intense at moments, but make sure that we keep it attractive. Otherwise, it's just going to be us sitting in a room going with loads of post-it notes, what went on.
But it should be really exciting to make cool stuff, right? I mean, that's the whole point. And even old people like me like working at startups, because it's like the energy and the urgency of making this stuff. And you obviously, waterfall and urgency very, they don't really match together that well because of the sort of more extended timelines. But I think that the critical point out of all of that is, I think you kind of touched on it as well, like your customer doesn't care how you made it. Exactly. Your customer doesn't. So for us, we've got loads of machine learning and AI and cool buzzwords sort of powering a lot of our prediction technology. But frankly, if we could offer the same stuff supported by 5,000 people filling it in manually, the customers would buy it just the same, as long as it was the same price. And it's the same with methodology. People shouldn't care whether you're lean or you're Scrum or you're Kanban or you're extreme this or you're on fire that.
It's good to have a toolkit, right? It's good to have important to. It's fundamental to have a toolkit based on where your product's at. But it's it It is the application, you know, like a kung fu master or someone who's great at jujitsu and stand up Muay Thai and stuff. They know how to deploy this at the right time. And it's the same thing with this is you got to spend, it was really interesting. We had a T-shaped talk because if you take time to actually learn these things, and the thing is, it does just take time and experience, then you can deploy at the right time. And then you can find a new situation, especially right now. And this is one thing I think Jason and Ben really emphasized is this is a challenging situation. It's going to test practitioners. And look at this contrast though. I was just thinking about this. We're talking about, do we need agile practitioners? But then look at how many people are on the market right now, right? There's possibly a contrast going on. If you needed it that heavily, why are there so many? So my question to you is, look at what do you need? Is it lean? Do you just need people who can drive good product behaviors? And then if you're in a situation trying to find a job, adapt yourself or upskill. And maybe Jason, Ben, if you have any good resources, specifically that Avengers website as well, I wish I had something like that when I started out. It was old school, like it was the PDFs that you had written down and then you spoke to friends until you got some and you made up some tools and techniques. But that's gold. And then Jason as well, if you have any recommended material, maybe just add you guys on LinkedIn. You can share it well. Yeah.
Yeah, and also just regarding LinkedIn, I mean, I'm always delighted to waffle on about product and the sort of agile delivery and frankly anything technical and nerdy as well, because I just find it all fascinating. So feel free to anyone on this call, feel free to drop me a line, ask me any questions, or if you think that I'm in any way qualified to answer them, or just shout at me. It fascinates me, all of it. So I'm always,
I agree. If anyone wants to contact everyone, go and contact Jason, not me, because I'm going to be on holiday for the next 4 days.
Right. Thank you very much, guys. Really, really informative. And yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for taking the time out on Thursday to tune in. And again, thank you for the speakers. Some really interesting topics. And this is what these communities are all about, to start the discussion. And if you want to continue the discussion, then please feel free to contact any of these guys on LinkedIn or comment on the Agile Roundabout LinkedIn page. So we're hoping to have the next Agile Roundabout information up very shortly, but again, thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope to see you all guys soon, and I hope you all have a good evening. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Speak soon. Bye-bye.